The rain fell hard on the broken street. Thunder rolled across the empty sky. Old buildings leaned on each other like tired giants. Most windows were dark. Only a few pale lights flickered inside small shops that were still open. The air smelled of metal, smoke, and wet dirt. A man named Kalen Reed walked alone through the ruined market road. His coat was heavy and torn. Water dripped from his hair. He kept his hands deep in his pockets, head down, boots splashing in puddles. He was not looking for trouble. He was only passing through another forgotten alien town after a supply run, but trouble found him first. Near the end of the street stood an old metal post. Something was tied to it. At first, Callan thought it was a broken robot or a thrown-away bag. Then lightning flashed. He froze. It was a child, not human. A small alien girl no older than 10. Her skin had a soft violet glow beneath the rain. Long silver hair stuck to her face. Her wrists were bound with dirty rope. A wooden board hung around her neck. Words were burned into it. "Take her for a bottle of liquor." Callan stood still for a long moment. The sound of rain grew louder in his ears. The girl looked up at him, shivering. Her big crystal eyes held no hate, only fear, and something deeper, like she had already accepted whatever humans decided. He looked around. A few locals stood under roofs watching. None stepped forward. One man laughed and took a drink from a tin cup. Another spat on the ground and turned away. They all pretended the child was invisible. Callan clenched his jaw. He had seen many bad things during the human-alien war. He had seen cities burn and people chained. But this felt smaller and crueler. Like the world had forgotten kindness. He walked closer. The girl tried to shrink away. He stopped a few steps from her. "Who did this to you?" he asked. She did not answer. Her lips were blue from cold. Her voice came out as a broken whisper, not in any language he knew. He glanced again at the sign. "Take her for a bottle of liquor." A trade. Someone had traded a living child for a drink. Callan's stomach turned. He looked at the nearby shop. Inside, a large alien merchant leaned against the counter, laughing with his friends. A half-empty bottle stood beside him. When he saw Callan staring, he smirked. "You want her?" he shouted through the rain. "One bottle, friend, good deal. She eats little." The men inside laughed. Callan's fists tightened. He stepped forward until the rain hit his face like knives. He didn't answer the merchant. He pulled out a knife, cut the ropes around the girl's wrists, and threw the sign into the mud. The laughter stopped. The girl flinched as he touched her, but she didn't pull away. Her arms were thin, covered with bruises. When the rope fell, she looked at him with wide, confused eyes. For the first time, a tear mixed with the rain on her cheek. Callan lifted her gently. She weighed almost nothing. He wrapped his coat around her small body. The townsfolk watched in silence. He met their eyes one by one. No one moved. No one helped. He turned and began to walk. Behind him, someone shouted, "Leave her." "She's cursed." Another yelled, "That thing brings death."
Callan didn't look back.
He just kept walking, boots heavy in the wet mud, carrying the trembling alien child through the storm. They reached the end of the road. The lights of the town faded behind them. The forest began, dark and whispering. Callan stopped under an old steel bridge to rest. He set the girl down on a dry patch of ground. She hugged her knees and stared at the water dripping from the bridge beams. He knelt beside her. "You have a name?" he asked softly. No answer. Only the sound of rain and her quiet breathing. He sighed and pulled out a small energy bar from his pocket. He broke it in half and offered it. She hesitated, then took it slowly. She ate like someone who hadn't eaten in days. For a moment, Callan saw a faint light under her skin, like her veins glowed when she swallowed. He frowned. He had seen bioluminescent aliens before, but this was different. The light pulsed almost like a heartbeat. He looked at the old sign lying on the ground near them. The letters blurred under the rain, but he could still read the words. He thought about the bottle of liquor. He thought about how cheap a life had become in this world. He whispered, "Not tonight." He stood, adjusted his coat, and looked at the road ahead. His cabin was miles away, but it was the only safe place he knew. He looked down at the girl again. Her eyes followed him with quiet trust now. No words, only a look that said everything. He lifted her once more and started walking. The rain kept falling. The wind howled through the trees. Somewhere far behind them, a dog barked, then stopped, and in that silence, Callan felt something strange in his chest. Not fear, not anger, something like purpose. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know what trouble would follow. But he knew one thing. He couldn't leave her tied to that post. As they disappeared into the forest, the last bolt of lightning flashed behind them. It lit the ruined town for one brief moment. The metal post still stood there, empty. The wooden sign lay broken in the mud. And in that flash, anyone who looked could swear they saw faint glowing footprints leading away. Footprints of a man and a child, heading toward the mountains. The forest was quiet when Callan reached his cabin. The rain had slowed, but the wind still moved through the tall, dark trees. The small wooden house stood alone near a stream, half hidden by rocks and ferns. Its walls were old but strong. Smoke from the chimney rose into the cold night air. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dim and warm. A small fire burned in the corner fireplace. Tools and metal scraps lay on the table. Maps hung on one wall and an old rifle rested near the door. Callan placed the alien girl gently on a chair near the fire. Her wet clothes clung to her skin. Steam rose from them as she sat there shivering. He took a dry blanket from the shelf and wrapped it around her shoulders. She didn't resist. She looked tired, as if she hadn't slept for days. Her glowing eyes followed every move he made. When he placed a cup of warm water on the table, she reached for it with both hands. She sipped slowly, watching him between each sip like she still didn't trust him fully. Callan sat down across from her. The silence between them felt heavy but calm. He had questions, many of them, but he knew she wouldn't answer yet. He saw the bruises on her wrists, the small cuts on her face, the marks on her arm that faintly glowed in the firelight. He looked away, pretending not to notice. Sometimes silence was kinder than words. After a while, he said quietly, "You're safe here." She didn't speak, only looked at him. Her silver hair caught the firelight, making her look almost unreal. Then she pointed to herself and whispered one soft word. "Alien." He repeated it slowly. "Alien." She nodded once, her eyes still unsure but softer now. He smiled faintly. "All right, alien, you can stay here tonight." He gave her a bowl of soup and some bread. She ate in small bites, careful and quiet. When she finished, she sat close to the fire, hugging her knees under the blanket. Her eyes moved to the window again and again. Something out there still scared her. Callan stood and locked the door. He checked his rifle, then hung it back. When he looked through the window, he saw nothing but rain falling on the dark forest. But deep inside, he felt that they were not alone. Someone or something was searching for her. He returned to his chair, tired but alert. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Outside, the storm faded into distant thunder. He thought about the words on the sign. "Take her for a bottle of liquor." He wondered what kind of people could do that to a child. Then he looked at Alien again. Her skin glowed faintly like starlight on water. Her presence made the whole room feel different, alive. He asked, "Where are you from?" She looked up but didn't answer. Her hand moved to her arm, touching the glowing symbols. She whispered something in her language. It sounded like a prayer or maybe a memory. Then she stopped and listened. Her ears twitched slightly, as if she heard something far away. Callan followed her gaze. Outside, the forest was still. But then he saw it, a faint red light moving between the trees. Not fire, not lightning. Something else. He stood up quietly and turned off the lamp. The cabin went dark except for the firelight. He whispered, "Stay quiet." Alien nodded and crawled under the table, holding the blanket close.
Callan picked up his rifle and stepped to the window.
He saw the red light again, hovering, scanning. It moved in slow circles, then disappeared behind the ridge. He waited a few minutes, heart beating hard, before lowering his weapon. When he looked back at Alien, she was trembling. Her eyes glowed brighter now, full of fear. He went to her, knelt down, and said gently, "It's gone. You're safe. No one will hurt you here." Her breathing slowed. She looked at him like she was trying to believe those words. Finally, she whispered something he didn't understand, but her tone was thankful. Callan made her a small bed near the fire using extra blankets. When she lay down, she turned her face toward the flames and closed her eyes. Soon her breathing became soft and even. For the first time, she slept. He sat beside her, still watching the window. He didn't know what kind of world she came from or why she was abandoned. But he knew this much: whatever hunted her would not stop easily. He looked at her small, glowing form and thought, "If they come again, they'll have to go through me first." Outside, the last of the rain faded. The forest became silent, but somewhere in the darkness, mechanical eyes blinked once, recording the cabin's faint heat signature. A low sound came from the trees, almost like metal breathing. Inside, Callan didn't hear it. He only stared at the fire until sleep finally took him, unaware that the night had already begun to watch them both. Morning came slow and quiet. Soft light crept through the cracks of the cabin walls. Smoke from the dying fire drifted upward. Callan opened his eyes and stretched his sore back. The storm had passed, leaving behind a clean stillness. For a moment, he forgot there was someone else in the room. Then he saw her. Alien was sitting near the fireplace, watching the glowing embers with calm eyes. The blanket was still wrapped around her small body. Her silver hair shone faintly in the morning light. She looked peaceful now, not like the frightened child from last night. Callan stood and poured some water into a pot. He lit the small burner and began to make tea. The simple rhythm of boiling water filled the silence. He glanced at her again. She was tracing her fingers over her arm, following the strange glowing lines that moved under her skin. It was the first time he saw them clearly in daylight. The symbols looked alive, thin lines like rivers of light. They pulsed softly, fading and glowing again in a slow pattern. He stepped closer and said gently, "Does it hurt?" She looked up at him and shook her head. Then she whispered, "No, it talks." He froze. He thought he had heard her wrong. "What do you mean it talks?" She touched her arm again. "The mark. It whispers when I sleep. It shows pictures, places I don't know." Callan crouched beside her and studied the markings. He had seen many alien designs before during the war. Tribal marks, genetic tags, coded brands, but nothing like this. This one looked ancient, something older than any known species, something that didn't belong to war or science. He carefully took a small scanner from the drawer. It was an old tool from his soldier days, used to identify energy signatures. He ran it near her skin. The screen flashed in warning colors, energy levels far beyond normal biological limits. Then the device shut down completely, battery dead. Callan frowned. The air around her arm even felt warmer. Alien watched him with wide eyes. She seemed curious, not afraid. "You are human," she said softly. Her voice was still slow but clearer than before. "You should not be near me." He raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" She looked at the fire. "They will come. They always come when it glows." His grip on the scanner tightened. He thought about the red light in the forest last night. Someone was looking for her, and they were close. He sat down beside her. "I don't care who they are," he said quietly. "They won't take you." Alien looked at him again. There was confusion in her eyes, like she didn't understand why a human would say that. In her world, humans were enemies. That's what she had been told. But this one kept giving her warmth, food, and safety. It made no sense. As the day went on, Callan tried to learn more. He pointed at objects and named them slowly: chair, cup, fire, door. She repeated each word, her voice soft but steady. By noon, she was smiling faintly when she said, "bread." He smiled too, feeling something he hadn't felt in years: peace. But peace didn't last long. In the afternoon, the forest went quiet. No birds, no wind, just silence. Callan noticed it first. He put his cup down and walked to the window. Nothing moved outside, yet his instincts screamed danger. He looked at Alien. Her glowing mark had turned brighter, almost white. Her breathing quickened. She whispered, "They are near." Callan grabbed his rifle and loaded it. Through the trees, faint shadows moved, too smooth, too silent to be human. He saw flashes of metal and glass, drones, at least 3 of them, scanning the area. He crouched and told her, "Stay down." She obeyed, hiding behind the table again. The drones hovered near the cabin, red lights blinking. Then one of them turned toward the window. Callan fired once. The shot cracked through the still air and the drone fell. Sparks exploded across the yard. The other 2 pulled back, flying into the forest. Smoke filled the room. Alien covered her ears. Callan shut the door quickly and checked his ammo. He had a bad feeling those machines were scouts, not hunters, which meant the real ones were coming soon. When he looked back at Alien, the light on her arm began to fade again. She looked pale and tired, like the glow had taken her strength. Callan knelt beside her and said softly, "You said it talks to you. What does it say now?" She closed her eyes for a moment, then whispered, "It says we must run, before the night." Callan looked out the window again. The forest felt heavier now, darker. He knew she was right. Whatever she carried in that mark, it was dangerous, powerful, and hunted. He packed his gear, ready to move before sunset. As he slung his bag over his shoulder, he looked at her once more. She was standing now, small and fragile, yet something in her eyes looked older than him. He said, "Then we run together." And for the first time she smiled. Outside in the deep forest, mechanical wings unfolded. The hunt had already begun. The sun was setting when Callan heard the knock. It was slow and heavy, echoing through the wooden cabin walls. He froze where he stood. He had just finished packing a few supplies, ready to move out before night. Alien sat on the floor near the fire, quiet and still. Her eyes lifted toward the door. The glowing mark on her arm shimmered faintly again, like it could sense something wrong. Callan raised his hand for silence. No one visited this deep in the forest. The nearest town was miles away. He moved to the window and looked outside through a narrow crack. Two men stood near the gate. They wore long brown coats, but under the fabric he saw metal shining at their belts. Weapons. Their boots were clean, their faces hard. They were not travelers. They were searching. Callan whispered, "Stay quiet, alien." He walked to the door and opened it halfway. Cold air rushed in. One of the men smiled. "Evening, sir. Sorry to bother you. We're looking for a missing child. Heard someone might have seen her near this area." Callan kept his face calm. "A child? Haven't seen anyone." The man's eyes moved past him into the cabin. The other stepped closer, scanning the inside. They were too calm, too practiced. They knew something. The first man said, "Strange thing, though. The one we're after isn't exactly human. Some say she glows in the dark." He grinned, showing metal teeth. "Sound familiar?" Callan's heart pounded. He forced a small laugh. "I'm alone here." "Oh, glowing kids, I promise." The man looked unconvinced. He stepped forward, boots creaking on the wood floor. Before Callan could stop him, he took a long look around the cabin. His eyes paused at the corner near the fire. Alien was gone. The blanket she had been sitting on lay empty. The second man moved closer to the window, pretending to look outside. "Funny. We tracked the signal here," he said softly. Callan's hand moved toward the rifle resting near the table, hidden by shadow. Then the first man turned back to him. "Well, if you see anything unusual, let us know." He reached into his coat and tossed a small metallic card onto the table. It landed with a sharp click. "Call this frequency. We pay well for information." Callan nodded, keeping his voice steady. "Sure, I'll keep an eye out." The two men walked back toward the trees. They didn't look back, but he could tell from their posture they weren't done. They would come again, maybe with more soldiers, maybe at night. When their footsteps faded, Callan shut the door and locked it. He turned around and whispered, "Alien?" No answer. Then a soft sound came from under the floor. He knelt and lifted a loose wooden plank. Alien crawled out, her small body shaking. Her mark was glowing bright now like silver fire under her skin. "They found us," she whispered. Tears filled her eyes. Callan nodded. "I know. We need to leave before dark." He went to the back room and grabbed a backpack, stuffing it with tools, ammo, and rations. Alien watched him with worry. Her hands trembled, not from fear but from something else, like energy building inside her. She said, "They will not stop. The mark calls to them." He stopped and looked at her. "What does it call them for?" She touched her arm again. "It is a key. They want to open something." Callan frowned. "Open what?" She shook her head. "I don't know. I only know it is not safe." He walked to her, put a hand on her shoulder and said, "Then we keep it safe, whatever it is." She looked at him confused. Humans weren't supposed to care, but this one did, and something about that scared her even more. Before leaving, Callan went to the window again. In the distance, the two men were still visible, talking near a small transport vehicle. A faint red light blinked on their helmets. They were calling someone. Reinforcements, maybe drones. He turned back to Alien. "Can you walk?" She nodded weakly. He handed her a thick coat. "Put this on." We moved through the canyon. No open trails. They stepped outside. The forest was darker now. Mist rose from the wet ground, wrapping the trees in ghostly shapes. Alien stayed close behind him, her feet silent on the dirt path. Every few steps she glanced back as if expecting to see shadows following. When they reached the ridge, Callan looked down and saw lights moving through the trees. Dozens of them, too many. They're sweeping the whole area, he muttered. Alien looked up at him. Her eyes glowed brighter than before. I can hide us, she whispered. Her hands lifted, and the air around them shimmered like glass. The lights below passed right under their hiding place without stopping. No sensors reacted. It was like they had vanished. Callan stared at her in quiet shock. She lowered her hands, breathing hard. It won't last long, she said softly, but it will give us a head start. He nodded and began to lead her deeper into the woods. Behind them, the men with metal teeth searched in silence, unaware how close they had come. And above them all, far beyond the forest clouds, a signal pulsed in orbit, confirming that the target had been found. The real hunt was about to begin. Night wrapped the forest in thick silence. The air was cold and heavy with mist. Callan led the way through narrow trails between black trees. The small lantern in his hand cast a weak glow on the path ahead. Behind him, Alien walked slowly, clutching the coat around her shoulders. Her breath came out in small clouds. She was tired but didn't complain. Every sound around them felt louder than it should. The crack of a branch, the whisper of leaves, the quiet rush of the nearby stream. Callan stopped often to listen. He knew the sound of drones when they flew low, the hum of engines that searched in patterns. He had lived through wars. He knew how soldiers hunted, and whoever wanted Alien was using every trick from the battlefield. They reached a fallen bridge made of stone and metal. Half of it had collapsed into the river below. Callan looked across the gap. The other side was only a few meters away, but too far to jump. He found an old log, pushed it into place, and tested it with his weight. It groaned but held. Cross slowly, he said. Alien nodded. She stepped onto the log, balancing carefully as the river roared beneath her. The water glowed faint blue under the moonlight, full of minerals from the mountains. Halfway across, she froze. A sound came from above, faint at first, then stronger. Engines. Callan looked up. Dark shapes moved between the clouds. Searchlights cut across the forest. He shouted, "Go!" Alien ran the last few steps and jumped to the other side. Callan followed, pulling the log down into the water to hide their path. They ran uphill until they reached a rocky ridge. From there, Callan could see fire in the distance. The soldiers were burning parts of the forest to flush them out. Lines of orange light moved like rivers of flame. Smoke curled up into the night. The smell of burning wood filled the air. Alien stopped, breathing hard. Her eyes reflected the firelight. "They burn everything," she whispered. Callan looked at the flames spreading below. "They want to leave nothing behind. They want you no matter the cost." She looked down at her arm. The glowing mark was brighter again, almost painful to look at. She said, "It reacts to fear. I can feel them. They follow the light." Callan took her hand and said, "Then we move before they catch it." They climbed higher into the mountain path. The ground was sharp and rough. The night wind turned colder. Callan's boots slipped on loose stones, but he kept pulling her forward. He could see lights chasing them below, bright red beams moving through the smoke. Suddenly, one of the drones appeared from the clouds ahead. It hovered, scanning the ridge. A beam of light swept across the rocks. Callan grabbed his rifle and fired once. The drone jerked and crashed into the cliff, exploding into sparks. The noise echoed through the valley. Alien covered her ears. More lights appeared in the distance, heading toward them fast. Callan grabbed her arm. "This way," he said, pulling her toward a cave opening behind a line of sharp rocks. They ran inside just as another drone fired from above, hitting the ground where they had been seconds ago. The explosion lit the cave walls in red flashes. Inside the cave, it was dark and narrow. Callan used the small lantern again. The walls shimmered with mineral crystals that glowed softly. Alien touched them and whispered, "Old world stone. My people used to live near caves like this." He looked at her, surprised. "You remember them?" She hesitated. "Only in dreams. Sometimes I see faces when I close my eyes. A woman calling my name, then pain, then nothing." Her voice trembled. He knelt beside her and said quietly, "You don't have to remember everything now. You only have to survive tonight." She nodded, her eyes filled with tears. For a moment, they both sat in silence. Outside, the sound of engines faded into the distance. The night became calm again, but they knew it wouldn't last. Callan checked his rifle and leaned against the wall. "You need rest," he said. Alien lay down beside the lantern, wrapping the coat tighter. The glow from her mark dimmed slowly as she closed her eyes. Kaelin watched her, thinking about the soldiers, the men with metal teeth, and the words she had said. The mark is a key. He didn't know what it could open, but he knew one thing now. The people chasing her didn't fear her power, they wanted it. And if they ever caught her, the fire in the forest would be nothing compared to what they would unleash. Outside the cave, the flames still burned across the valley. Ash drifted in the wind like snow. The hunters moved closer again. Guided by signals they didn't understand were already changing. Because as Alien slept, the light in her arm pulsed once more, and somewhere deep under the mountains, something ancient began to wake. The sun never reached deep inside the cave. When morning came, the light only touched the mouth of the entrance. Kaelin woke first. The fire had burned out during the night, leaving only gray ash. He looked at Alien sleeping beside the wall, her small hands tucked under her head, her face peaceful again after another night of fear. The glow on her arm had faded to a soft silver. For the first time, she looked like an ordinary child. Callan stepped outside quietly and scanned the valley below. Smoke still rose from the burned forest. He saw black shapes of drones circling far in the distance. The search had not stopped. He knew they would sweep the mountains next. Time was running out. When he went back inside, Alien was awake. She sat near the wall, staring at the glowing minerals. Her eyes reflected the soft blue light. She said in a low voice, "The earth remembers." Callan frowned. "What do you mean?" She touched the cave wall. "This place is old. Older than humans. Older than my people, too." Her fingers left a faint light trail on the stone. "It hides what they want." He knelt beside her. "You said they want to open something. What is it?" She hesitated, her small face serious now. "When I was taken, they told me I was a tool. They said the mark on me is a lock code. I am not supposed to live long. I am supposed to unlock something and then die." Her words came out steady but empty, as if she had already accepted them. Callan felt his stomach twist. He had seen weapons before, machines built from living things. But to use a child like this was beyond cruelty. He said quietly, "You're not a tool. You're alive, and I won't let them take you." Alien looked at him with uncertain eyes. "Why do you help me?" "Humans hate my kind. I saw it in the cities." He sighed. "I fought in the war. I saw hate from both sides. But not everyone is like that. You didn't choose to be born with that mark." She looked away, tears shining in the dim light. Then she whispered, "It hurts to be something they all want to destroy." Callan reached into his pocket and pulled out an old metal tag, the one from his uniform. He placed it in her hand. "My name was on this when I fought. It meant I belonged to someone's army, but I threw it away after the war because I didn't want to belong to hate anymore." He smiled faintly. "Now I think it belongs to you, to someone who deserves to be free." She stared at the tag in silence, then clutched it to her chest. A soft light spread from her arm again, brighter this time, but warm instead of harsh. The cave began to hum, a deep sound like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Rocks trembled. Callan stood up fast, gripping his rifle. "What's happening?" Alien looked up, frightened. "I didn't mean to. The mark reacts when I feel something strong." The glowing lines on her arm changed shape, forming circles and symbols. The light spread across the cave wall, revealing carvings that had been hidden under layers of stone. Ancient symbols, similar to hers. They pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Callan stared as the carvings shifted like moving liquid. He realized this place wasn't just a cave. It was a chamber built by something intelligent, something old. Alien touched one of the glowing marks on the wall. It responded, opening a small hollow in the stone. Inside was a sphere of glass filled with slow-moving light. She whispered, "It's a memory core. From before the war. It holds the map to the old worlds." Callan's eyes widened. "That's what they're after." She nodded. "If they find it, they will use it to rebuild weapons that can erase planets." He stepped back, thinking fast. "We can't stay here. They'll detect the energy soon." She reached for the sphere again, but when she touched it, the glow vanished. The core turned black. She gasped and fell to her knees. Callan caught her before she hit the ground. Her pulse was weak. The light on her arm flickered like a dying flame. "Easy," he said, holding her close. She opened her eyes slightly. "The mark took too much. It's not meant for me to use." Callan lifted her and whispered, "Then we hide the core and leave." He placed the sphere deep inside his pack, covering it with metal parts to block signals. He carried her toward the cave exit. The wind outside had changed direction. It carried the hum of approaching engines. As he stepped into the light, he looked at the horizon. Dark shapes were moving through the sky. Dozens of ships this time. They had found them. He looked down at Alien in his arms. Her eyes were closed, her face pale, but her hand still clutched his dog tag tight. The light on her arm glowed faintly once more, not in warning but in trust. Callan whispered, "Hold on. I'll get you through this." Then he started down the mountain path toward the storm waiting below. The wind howled through the mountain pass. Dust and smoke mixed in the cold air as Callan moved down the rocky trail carrying Alien in his arms. Her head rested against his shoulder, her skin faintly glowing again. He could hear the distant thunder of engines behind them. The hunters were closing in fast. The sky above burned with red lights from the search craft spreading across the clouds like fire. Callan stopped near a narrow ridge where broken stone walls stood half buried in snow, old ruins from a forgotten age. He set her down gently against the wall. She opened her eyes weakly and whispered, "You should leave me. They will not stop." He shook his head. "Then they'll find me too. I'm not leaving you." He checked his rifle. "Only a few bullets left." The small pack with the black sphere was strapped to his back. He could feel the hum of energy coming from it even through the fabric. It was alive somehow. He didn't understand it, but he knew it was what the enemy wanted. And Alien was the key to unlocking it. She looked up at him, her silver hair moving in the wind. "You don't understand," she said softly. "If they kill me, the mark will break and the core will open by force. Everything will burn." Callan stared at her for a moment. "Then we don't let them take you. Ever." The sky cracked with the sound of descending ships. Small pods dropped from above, hitting the ground and opening into armored soldiers. Their helmets glowed red in the dark. Weapons hummed as they advanced up the slope. Callan moved to a high rock, took aim, and fired. The first shot dropped one soldier, then another. But there were too many. Energy bolts cut through the air, hitting the walls around him, shattering rock and dust. He ducked behind cover, reloading fast. Alien tried to stand, but stumbled. The mark on her arm blazed bright white now, spreading across her chest like veins of light. She whispered, "It wants to wake." Callan shouted, "Don't let it. You'll burn yourself out." She looked at him with calm eyes. "I was made to die for it. But you were not." Before he could answer, a blast hit the ground near him, throwing him backward. Pain shot through his arm. He looked down and saw blood. The rifle slipped from his hand. He crawled toward Alien as soldiers closed in from both sides. They shouted commands, telling him to surrender. He ignored them and reached her side. Alien placed her small glowing hand on his wound. Warmth spread through his body. The bleeding stopped, but he saw the light in her arm dim. She was giving him her energy. He grabbed her wrist gently. "Stop, you need it more." She smiled faintly. "You gave me a home. Let me give you hope." The ground began to shake. Rocks fell from the cliffs above. The soldiers stopped, unsure what was happening. The black sphere in Callan's pack pulsed with light, matching the rhythm of Alien's mark. Then the air filled with a deep hum that vibrated through every bone. Alien stood, her eyes glowing like twin stars. She raised her hand toward the sky. A wave of light spread out from her body, passing through stone and steel. The soldiers' weapons shut down one by one. Engines failed. The red lights in their helmets flickered out. They dropped to their knees, helpless. Callan could barely look at her. The light was too bright. He shouted over the wind, "Alien, stop! You'll die." She looked back at him, her face calm, her voice soft. "I was never meant to live long, but I can choose what my life means." The light expanded, reaching the sky, touching the ships above. One by one, the crafts froze in midair and then vanished in a burst of white flame that left no sound behind. When the light faded, the mountain was silent. The air was still. Only the sound of the wind returned. Callan blinked through the dust and searched the ridge. Alien was lying on the ground, her glow almost gone. He ran to her side, dropped to his knees, and lifted her head gently. Her eyes fluttered open. "It's over," he whispered. She smiled weakly. "No, it's beginning." Her hand touched his chest, right over his heart. The mark on her arm moved to his skin like flowing light, disappearing into him. She whispered, "Now it will live in you. It chose you." Then her eyes closed and the last of her glow faded into the cold air. Callan sat there, holding her still body, Snow began to fall again, soft and silent. He looked at his hand and saw the faint pattern of the mark glowing under his skin. The same light that once lived in her now pulsed in him. He looked up at the empty sky and whispered, "You gave me hope too, far beyond the mountains, where the light from her final act had reached space." Old sensors on forgotten satellites began to blink awake. Something ancient stirred, something that remembered her kind and the promise they made long ago to protect life. And somewhere deep inside that system, a signal answered back. It carried her name. Callan stood, the mark still glowing faintly on his hand, and began walking down the mountain through the falling snow. He didn't know where the road would lead, but he knew one truth now. The world had not lost her. She lived through him, and the light she carried was only the beginning.